Hello again, and welcome back to Jam Yesterday. Today I'll be discussing vegetarianism in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and then I'm going to finish up by making a dish called Eve's Pudding, using a recipe from Martha Brotherton's 1833 cookbook, Vegetable Cookery, with an introduction recommending abstinence from animal food and intoxicating liquors. To begin with, does vegetarianism even come up in Frankenstein? Are any of the characters vegetarian? If so, who? So the word vegetarian is never actually used in the novel, but the topic of the creature's diet does come up about 2/3 of the way through the book. So this is after Victor Frankenstein has created his modern Prometheus, and he's rejected it due to its monstrous appearance. So the creature escapes and murders Victor's brother, framing the boy's nanny for the crime. So months later, Victor finds the creature, and the creature tells Victor his story. This scene occurs right at the end of the creature's tale when the creature begs Victor to create a mate for him.
You must create a female for me, with whom I can live in the interchange of those sympathies necessary for my being. This you alone can do, and I demand it of you as a right which you must not refuse to concede. I do refuse it, I replied, and no torture shall ever extort a consent from me. Shall I create another like yourself, whose joint wickedness might desolate the world? Begone! You are in the wrong, replied the fiend, and instead of threatening, I am content to reason with you. I am malicious because I am miserable. Am I not shunned and hated by all mankind? You, my creator, would tear me to pieces and triumph. Remember that, and tell me why I should pity man more than he pities me. If you consent, neither you nor any other human being shall ever see us again. I will go to the vast wilds of South America. My food is not that of man. I do not destroy the lamb and the kid to glut my appetite. Acorns and berries afford me sufficient nourishment. My companion will be of the same nature as myself, and will be content with the same fare. We shall make our bed of dried leaves. The sun will shine on us as on man, and will ripen our food.
So in this scene, the creature states that while he's not above hurting those who have despised and rejected him, which that would be humans, he doesn't eat the flesh of animals, and he specifically states young animals. He subsists instead on nuts and berries. He doesn't specifically say he's vegetarian, but we can infer that. He may even be vegan, although that idea wasn't really around amongst the Romantics. So why would Mary Shelley make the creature vegetarian? Would the average British person in the 19th century even know what a vegetarian was? Was this really a thing at this point in history? So vegetarianism was actually fairly common amongst the Romantics in the early 19th century, including both Percy and Mary Shelley. You can actually trace it weirdly, in part due to the popularization of the microscope. So in the 17th and 18th centuries, we discovered that life exists at a microscopic cellular level. At the same time, people start to study comparative anatomy. So they dissect a pig's heart, say, and a human heart, and they note the similarities. So these discoveries eventually coalesce with Romantic ideas about nature and this idea that instead of being separate from or above nature, which is more of an Enlightenment era philosophy, man is a part of nature, so he's part of this continuum that goes from single-celled organisms to plants to animals to humans. Percy Shelley actually even believed that there was life on the moon. So basically, the idea is that if man is not above nature but a part of nature, and if other parts of nature, like pigs and sheep and cows, can feel pain, then we shouldn't hurt them and we shouldn't eat them, hence vegetarianism in this context. So at the time Frankenstein was written, the word vegetarianism hadn't been coined. That wouldn't happen until the 1840s. So in Mary Shelley's day, vegetarians referred to themselves as Pythagoreans. Not actually because they were really into triangles, although Percy, Mary Shelley, Lord Byron, their whole set was very much into romantic triangles. But the Pythagoreans believed that the theory that Pythagoras put forward, that there is a single soul that can transmit from being to being at death, sort of like reincarnation. They believe that this really dovetailed with their beliefs in this sort of one nature, we're all part of nature, which is why they call themselves Pythagoreans. So tying this back to Frankenstein then, you have Mary Shelley, who believes in this philosophy of man as a part of nature, not above nature. And she makes a point to say that the creature doesn't eat animals. At the same time, throughout the novel, you see Victor Frankenstein attend vivisections in which people experimented on live animals. He's also, he's hacking apart corpses to build this creature. He definitely thinks himself to be above nature and possibly even above his fellow humans. The creature, on the other hand, is part of nature. So you have the creature versus the creator. And Shelley makes a point of grounding the creature in nature. He's a part of nature. He's then aligned with this sort of romantic philosophy. She does make a point to say that the creature is not above hurting humans because they rejected him first, essentially, but he will not hurt even a baby animal. He's rejected by men who think themselves above nature. So the creature's vegetarianism sort of speaks to his rejection by his creator, as well as his subsequent rejection of his creator and his creator's worldview. So there are a lot of different ways to read this scene. You can read it as a rejection of God and religion as the creator. You can also read it as the Romantics' rejection of Enlightenment era philosophy. You can also read it on a more personal level as Mary Shelley's rejection of the Enlightenment philosophy of her own parents, who her father rejected her when she began her relationship with Percy Shelley. But however we choose to read it, it's clear that the creature's vegetarianism is one of the ways in which Shelley ties the creature to romantic ideals and centers the story on the creature rather than on Victor Frankenstein. Since the creature is vegetarian, I thought it might be interesting to look into what a vegetarian diet in Mary Shelley's time would look like. Mostly because while in the scene the creature talks about eating acorns and berries, I didn't think that would be very interesting to watch. So I did some research into vegetarian cookbooks. The earliest vegetarian cookbook I could find was Martha Brotherton's book, which was published in 1833. It's got a lot of different recipes. A lot of them are for root vegetables, mostly boiled, some in pie form. But I thought it might be a little more fun to try to make Eve's pudding, partially because I think it kind of ties into the whole idea of Frankenstein and the creature referring to himself repeatedly as Adam. The other thing I think you will see when you see the recipe.
If you'd have a good pudding, pray mind what you're taught. Take twopennyworth of egg when there's 12 for a groat. Take of the same fruit, 'tis said Eve did once cousin, when pared and well chopped, at least half a dozen. 6 ounces of bread, give a beggar the crust, and greater the crumb as small as the dust. 6 ounces of currants, well cleaned from the dirt, lest they break your poor teeth and spoil all your sport. The rind of a lemon, grated quite thin, will do it no harm if the whole you put in. 6 ounces of sugar will not make it too sweet. Some nutmeg and salt will make it complete. Now boil it 3 hours without hurry or flutter, and then serve it up with some good melted butter. Note well, Mother Eve made this pudding so wondrous nice that Adam exclaimed, "Give me another slice."
What on earth does that mean? Not just for the modern day cook, but for any cook. That was not a recipe, that was a poem. I have never worked with poetry-based cooking before, so I guess we will see how that goes. So first of all, twopennyworth of eggs when there's 12 for a groat. I know next to nothing about the British currency system, but I believe a groat is worth 4 pence. So twopenny would be half a dozen eggs. The same fruit, 'tis said Eve did cousin. I'm thinking that's apples, so half a dozen apples. I'm using Granny Smith here. I think Bromley, I don't know how to pronounce it, would be more traditional, but I could not get those here in the US, so we're going with Granny Smith. 6 ounces of bread, and greater the crumb as fine as the dust, so I have 6 ounces of breadcrumbs. I made the bread myself, which is probably way more than anybody needs to do, but I figured commercially made bread now doesn't really stale the way bread used to before you had additives in it. So I made my own. I used about 25% whole wheat and 75% white flour. 6 ounces of currants, well cleaned from the dirt, lest they break your poor teeth and spoil all your sport. That's easy, that's currants. Luckily, ours do not have seeds in them in the modern day, so I do not have to seed my currants. The rind of a lemon, grated quite thin, lemon rind, easy. 6 ounces of sugar will not make it too sweet. I'm using Demerara sugar here. You could get white sugar in the Regency and Victorian era, but it probably wasn't quite as refined as the white sugar we use now, and it would have been really expensive, so I'm using something that's got a little more molasses in it. Some nutmeg and salt will make it complete. Just again, I'm going to grate a little bit of nutmeg and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with my apples, crack all my eggs, whisk them up, and then mix everything together, and we will see what happens then. First, I peeled, cored, and diced all of my apples. Next, I cracked all of my eggs into a bowl and whisked those up until they were reasonably uniform. Once that was done, I added them into the bowl with the apples. Next, I zested the lemon. Then I grated just a little bit of nutmeg into the bowl. It was probably about 1/4 teaspoon. After that, I dumped in my breadcrumbs, followed by the sugar, then the currants, and finally the salt. Next, I just mixed it all up until the mass was, again, fairly uniform. Once everything was mixed together, it was time to put the pudding in the pudding cloth. I have never worked with a pudding cloth before, but I read online that you're first supposed to boil it, which I did. And so this cloth was still steaming, which it's apparently supposed to be. Then you coat it with either just butter or butter and flour. I decided to go with butter and flour, better safe than sorry, I figured. And once that was done, I just kind of dumped the mixture onto the cloth, hoping for the best. Wasn't the neatest process in the world, but we got there in the end. Once everything was in the cloth, it was time to tie it up. And in the process of tying it up, I realized that might not have been exactly the right approach, so I decided to grab another cloth just in case everything decided to escape and tie that up with twine. Hopefully, this would result in the pudding staying in the cloth and not just sort of spewing all over my pot of boiling water. And with everything mixed up, it was time to throw the pudding into the pot of boiling water. I've mixed up my pudding, so now I am going to boil it for 3 hours. I've got a pot of boiling water here, and I've got a little dish in the bottom so the pudding doesn't sit right on the burner. I'm just going to lower this in and hope it doesn't overflow. Yeah, that's just about right. I'm going to top it off just a little bit and make a huge mess, and recover it and boil it for 3 hours. It has been 3 hours, so let's open it up and see what it looks like. Not much at the moment. Gonna fish it out, and then, oh, it is heavy. It is heavy. I think a lot of the butter was lost to the water, and just let that set it aside. You're supposed to let it cool for 20 minutes. So I will do that, and there's a lot of steam, isn't there? I'm gonna wait for it to stop steaming and then unwrap it, and in the meantime I'm going to melt a little bit of butter and then we will taste it. So 20 minutes have passed, and as you can see, I have gotten into my evening dress, and we are ready to unwrap this and see if it completely falls apart and is disgusting, or if it's actually any good. So I'm just gonna snip this thread I put around it, and remove cloth number 1. Which it's a good thing I put on because there's a bit of a mess within cloth number 2 and it's still very hot. It's probably why you should knot these. Well, it looks like it's cooked, although it's kind of sunk in the middle. I'm gonna see if I can unfold it or unfurl it. Yeah, that held together pretty well. It's not beautiful like most of the things I have made thus far for this show, but it is at least cooked. So I'm gonna pour some butter around it and then we're gonna serve it.
All right, so we have made our Eve's pudding and we are ready to taste it. And once again, we have Matt. Hopefully all of his fans have been waiting for him to make an appearance. Here he is. So yeah, let's give it a try.
All right.
So I guess first off, appearance, what do we think?
It's not the best looking dessert I've ever seen in my life.
No.
It doesn't look bad though. I mean,
It's a little hideous.
yeah, but like the inside of an apple pie isn't pretty, and this has, some apples and
That's
and
true.
raisin looking things.
Mostly apple, so I like it. I like everything though. I'm a really terrible taster because I like most things I eat. What do you think?
This tastes good. It tastes really, it is a lot like a apple pie kind of flavor.
Yeah, kind of like an apple cobbler.
Yeah. My dessert knowledge is letting me down a little bit there.
I would have liked for it to have a little more spice, so it's just a little bit of nutmeg, some cinnamon or something. Although maybe that's just the American in me. I want it to taste like an apple pie. I don't know.
Yeah, then it would taste like an apple pie.
Yeah. Got a lot of currants. If you like currants, it's good though.
Yeah, this tastes good. Sweet, a little tangy.
Yeah. I use mostly apple, so the apple comes through really nicely. So we talked about the appearance a little bit, which is not the best. It looks like it boiled for 3 hours. It's not overcooked though. I was a little worried boiling for 3 hours it would get really tough. But no. Texture-wise, it's good.
Yeah, it's nice and tender. It's not tough. It's not like falling apart either. It's
holding together.
texture-wise, it's really nice.
Yeah, considering it's just like eggs and bread basically. There's no milk, there's no butter, there's not really anything enriching it.
Yeah, it's a little bit like a muffin just out of the oven or something like that. Moister, but like that kind of a consistency.
Yeah, so as far as like evoking the era, does this make you feel like it's the 19th century or the Regency era, or the book is set in the 18th century, so...
Yeah, I guess a little bit. It doesn't seem that far off from like what somebody would eat today. If you take away the fact that it's made by boiling it for 3 hours, well, that seems a little strange, at least to the American perspective.
That's something they still do, I think, in British cooking.
Yeah, that seemed a little strange, but like taste-wise, texture-wise.
So it's not really evoking the era for you then.
I don't know. I guess you have the expectation that something from that far back probably just isn't as good as refined, and maybe this isn't super refined, but it tastes good.
So I think the lack of spices kind of make it, to me, feel a little more old-fashioned. So
Still got citrus and nutmeg though.
that's true. And then appearance, I think it does look like it came from another era.
That's true.
Because we do a lot more to make our desserts look appealing now, I think, than they would have at that time. Although wealthier people would have eaten really exciting fancy desserts. I mean, this was the time of, all of the French chefs creating amazing desserts. But this is more of an everyday sort of thing. It feels very everyday, like nothing in it's really fancy.
This question showed my ignorance, but would as an everyday dessert, would the everyday person have access to things like citrus and nutmeg at this point?
I think so. So if you went a little further back in history, and the sugar is the big thing that, like, say, Renaissance era would have been huge, or even up through the 17th century would have been a lot more expensive. The 18th century, I learned this today, and this may be more information than anyone needs, but the Germans developed or figured out how to extract sugar from beets. So sugar was much, much more available in the 18th and 19th centuries than it had been before. Before, it was largely responsible for the slave trade, so that's not good. Because you had to grow sugarcane in tropical climates, so they couldn't make it in Europe, which is why it was so expensive. But yeah, so by this point, it would have been much more readily available.
Got it. Very interesting.
I don't know if that was interesting to anyone but me, but these are the things I learned when I researched these episodes. So yeah, anything else we want to add about it before we do scoring and final thoughts?
No, it's just kind of, I feel like our other, the other dishes we've tried have all kind of tasted good, but they've had some drawbacks to one extent or another.
Mm-hmm.
And this one's just kind of nice. I mean, it doesn't look great, but it's just kind of nice.
Yeah, I think its only drawback is it does look like a brain or something.
Yeah, but nothing else we've eaten this looks good either.
That's also true. But yeah, it's tasty though, and I would eat more of this. I would eat this for dessert any day of the week.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks. Stay tuned for wrapping up.
All right, so final judgment time. And on Jam Yesterday, we have a 3-point scoring system. We score on Jam Today or taste, Jam Yesterday or how evocative of the era the dish was, and Jam Tomorrow or appearance. For taste or Jam Today, I gave it a 9 and Matt gave it an 8.5. We both really liked it. Matt said that of all the things that we have tried thus far, this was the one that he thinks we would actually make again. On how evocative of the era was it, we disagreed a little bit. I gave it an 8 and Matt gave it a 6. I still feel that a modern dish, I think, would look better and it would have more spices or more flavorings in it, I think. And then finally on appearance, we both gave it a 3. It was really unfortunate looking. Very tasty, didn't really detract from it, but it was not a good looking dish. So that gives a total of 20 out of 30 for me and 17.5 out of 30 for Matt, giving us an average of 18.75 out of 30, which is actually right smack dab in the middle between the Coup Bouillon, which had 19.25, and the white soup, which had 17.5. So again, I guess the scores don't always reflect our overall would we have it again, just because the appearance again really makes a difference. And this was, unfortunately, it did look like a brain. But anyway, that was Eve's Pudding, and thank you so much for joining me while I rambled about Frankenstein and vegetarianism and made things that look like brains. I am really grateful for anybody who's out there watching. If you would like to, please take a second to like and subscribe. Also, I have a feeling you've probably seen them, but if you haven't, I would definitely check out my sister Rebecca's videos. They are amazing. She makes all kinds of amazing costumes. She made both of my outfits that I wore today, including my evening wear and my everyday wear. She is a fabulous seamstress, and she's a lot of fun to watch. So thank you all so much again, and we will see you next time on Jam Yesterday.